Hello and welcome. This is Witch on Witch. I am Brigantia Blackbird and I am joined by Wiccan Conservative. How are you?
I'm doing so good today. How are you?
The sun is shining for the first time in days, so I am doing absolutely amazing. So,
We must be opposite because it just started raining. So, kudos. Welcome to the sun.
we're just trying to keep the world in balance. I mean, if you've got storms, it's my obligation to have sun. Can't let it get out of whack.
Absolutely.
So today we are going to talk about the magical and the pagan household. Some of this will be universally applicable to all pagan households. Some will be a little bit more witch-centric since both of us are practitioners. But a lot of it will be about what actually sets these households apart from the non-pagan or the non-magical households. We've talked a little bit about how we deal with our households and home life and the domestic sphere and all that good stuff. But in the past, we've kind of emphasized the things that we have in common with pretty much everyone else. But today, I want to get into some of the things that make it different, both for our viewers who aren't really familiar with the pagan lifestyle and also hopefully as inspiration of new seekers. So, I,
Without further ado, let's
yeah.
go ahead and get started. I know that you made a list of things for us to go through, and I absolutely love the list. So, let's start with your first question.
All righty, cool. Well, the first thing I think we could talk about is what distinguishes a pagan household from a non-pagan household. And of course, this will vary depending on whose household it is. But if you look at yourself and other households, where do you think that difference lies? How would someone detect that?
It's funny because when you asked the question, I immediately started thinking, well, geez, if you walked into my house, I guess you wouldn't really notice so much that it was a pagan household because you wouldn't really understand what you were looking at unless, of course, you knew what those things were being used for. And I made a little bit of a list. So, what I have on my list that would be super uber noticeable, I guess would be the first thing. I live in the Bible Belt of Georgia, so the fact that there's not a single cross in my house would be a dead giveaway just for the area that I live in. So I think that that's the first thing that differentiates my household from everybody in my neighborhood. Another thing is I keep bells on my door. I don't know who's heard of the witches' bells,
Mm-hmm.
but it's supposed to ward away negative spirits and entities, and it's also good for knowing who's coming in and out of the house. So it's two practical uses that you can do very simply, and people ask me all the time, why do you have bells on your door? Another thing would be the broomstick, and I know I shared this with the Discord group earlier this week. The positioning of the broomstick. Good Witch knows that it is a practical tool that you keep in the house, one that you can use to sweep and cleanse. I know people have ritualistic broomsticks that they use for different purposes. Me, I use the sweep broom, but depending on where it is in the house, could signify different things. Especially if it's turned upside down, then witches, you already know what that means. Um,
It means go away. No visitors.
no, we are not taking callers at this time. That's exactly what that one means, and it works. If anybody was wondering. The next thing I wrote down was the dedication altar. We talk about that a lot on Discord, and I know that a few of your videos, Brigantia, have actually talked about this as well. If you keep a dedication altar in your house, typically, unless you walk into like a Asian household or a Buddhist household, you won't see these things. Now, you probably wouldn't see mine unless you came into my bedroom, but it is there, and it's not typical of a regular household, or at least I haven't seen them. I have an extended spice collection on my list because that's the other thing I've noticed is I tend to keep a lot of different spices for the hearthcraft that we're going to talk about a little bit later.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if anybody opened up my spice cabinet, they'd be like, what in the heck do you have all this stuff for?
Hey, they are useful tools. Even if you're
Yeah,
only
you
using it for
know,
normal cooking, but they are useful tools.
you got to keep backups of everything, especially when that stuff goes on sale. Rocks in weird places. I put that down on my list because I like charms. I like talismans. I like bringing objects into the home that have good connotations or good intentions. So you'll
Hmm.
see like maybe little rock formations in different places, and it looks out of place to you, but believe me, there's a reason for it. Um, Artwork, decorations, and the feng shui, the actual like movement of the household, the way that I position my furniture and things like that. I know that it's kind of a traditional non-pagan thing to think about because people want their home to be inviting.
Hmm.
But realistically, it has a practical magical purpose as well. It helps the flow of the house. And I think that it also ties in with house spirits, which we'll talk about again later. But that's my list.
I have a few things in common with your list. I think if the observant person, as soon as they were at my front door, they would notice something a little bit different. Because in my wreath that I have up there, in addition to it being a very pretty arrangement of summer flowers, but there's also a little wooden pentacle put in with it. Now, I mean, it's not completely in your face. It's not like it's the pentacle inside of the actual wreath to where it's just, there's no getting away from it. No, I saved that for Yule. But it is there. And if a person noticed that, like, huh, that's not the usual thing you see around here, these parts. But it's there because
Right?
it's protection and it's I've seen people use crosses and their wreaths on their front doors. I'm like, well, you know what? Why can't anyone of any other religion use something, a symbol of their faith, for a similar purpose? As kind of this declaration of this is who we are. So that's the first thing you see in my house. The next thing that you'll see, you'll come into my living room, and it's kind of a normal, smallish living room. But on top of the bookcases, where we have the TV and the books and all that other stuff, you do see this a floral arrangement and some pretties, but you also have those crystal rock formations, like you were talking about yourself a moment ago. It's in the color schemes to go with the rooms, but what the secret that um, the non-pagan person wouldn't realize is that all of those stones, they weren't just picked for their colors, but they were actually picked for their energetic properties. And I have a lot of quartz because I like to amp up the effect of everything I do, because magically I operate more like a cannonball than a scalpel. But I have a lot of blues. I have a lot of greens. It's about rest and relaxation because that's what I want this room to be. Particularly when my husband comes home from working at the factory, particularly since we're getting into summer season, I want him in a room that looks cool, that feels cool, and that has the energy vibes of you can decompress. Because I think that's one of the ways I really use my magic within the home of how can I create a good atmosphere that's going to be working for everyone. Then
Hmm.
you move through the living room, and because the person who divided this house into two units didn't have any sense, then you walk straight into our bedroom, which it functions like a hallway as much as it does a bedroom. Not ideal,
Oh,
but the rent is cheap, so you work with it. And then once you're in my
right.
bedroom, then that on the wall that faces south is actually my altar, which I know is a very weird place to be facing your altar, but Loki insisted and I cooperated, so that was that. It works. It works. But that's where I have little jars of ancestral dirts that I took from the gravesite of my grandfather to kind of have that there as a representation of him and the ancestors on that side of the family. I have the normal working tools that you would see on any kind of Wiccan altar, and it's also where I express myself a little bit more seasonally and where I keep, my library. We have the normal everybody books in the living room, and then we have my books on my bookshelf in the bedroom for my witch library. So that's pretty much of a clue. And if someone didn't pick up on that, it's because they just weren't paying attention. And then past
Right.
there, you go into my kitchen, and that's where I keep my more ritualistic household broom. It's always done up with seasonal flowers. Right now, it's just this explosion of reds and oranges and yellows and pinks and whites, and it's just lovely. And I have it hanging up, and It's just there, and I use it whenever I need to kind of give the house a little bit of a weekly cleansing. And then, uh, because my husband is not the tidiest of cooks, I'm not able to have my spices and my herbs hyper organized, but I at least have them contained in one spot. And uh, and I have everything just organized into little hubs. You know, there's the dishes hub, there's the spices hub, there's the baking hub, there's everything else cooking hub. So whenever you're in that particular section of the kitchen, the energy shifts. It changes. Now, I don't know if a normie
It's
would
yours.
yeah, I don't know if a normie would really pick up on that shift, but I certainly feel it. And I have noticed that my husband, who is not a practitioner, if it's not related to his particular hub, because he's much more of the cook, I'm much more of the baker, he doesn't really mess with that part of the kitchen. It's not like it repels him, but he just isn't drawn to it because that isn't his thing. And
Right,
and
right.
also in my kitchen, I like a very colorful kitchen. I whatever the seasonal rainbow palette is for the season, that's what I want in the kitchen because I want to feel like, you know how when you were in school and it was the first day of school and you had that fresh box of crayons and you had the biggest box of crayons you
Mm,
were able to manipulate your parents into getting you, the way they smelled, how perfectly arranged they were. That's the feeling I want to have every time I go to cook and bake in my kitchen. I want to feel like I have all the
nice.
possibilities ahead of me. And that really helps kind of stir things up magically as well. And then beyond that, I have the bathroom, which there's not a whole lot I do there magically apart from a lot of cleansing work. And sometimes it's just a place where I shut the freaking door, I light a candle, I put in a little bit of essential oil in my bath, and I say no to the world. Which that
Right.
just may not sound like much, but it is a very deliberate intention. It's like I put out this cloud of a fog of magic of don't bother me. And I think that's self-care right there. I really
Yeah.
do.
Yeah, I was going to say the bathroom is the most overlooked area of the house. And as you can see, it didn't even make its way onto my list either. But you do a lot of cleansing in the
Hmm.
bathroom, I think, and not just on a intestinal level either. So,
In more ways than one. And and there's another really neglected area of the house that doesn't get mentioned often in magical circles, and it's things like the laundry room. Well, I mean, this is the place where we don't just physically clean the clothes, but that process should hopefully also detach any unwanted energies from those garments. I mean, we've been at this game long enough to realize how energy can kind of get sticky and attach onto things. And especially if it's, you had a really bad day at work, you don't want that lingering on your clothes. You don't want to feel that bad vibe the next time you wear that shirt or put on those pants. So I do think that's one area where, as practitioners in general, we could stand to maybe do a little bit more, put ourselves out
agreed.
there.
You're right, because it used to be a process now when you had to actually hammer the dirt out of your own clothes. It became one of those things that you got involved with, and it was more conscientious of behavior to put your intent into it. But now you just toss it in the machine and go. So I think a lot of people are disconnected from that process, myself included. So I'm glad that you brought it up.
Well, it's not only that, but I find also the process of putting things away. I mean, this could just be my OCD brain, and if it is, please say so that anyone watching doesn't feel bad. But I feel better if everything is crisply and beautifully folded or nicely hung up. I have a system of organization in my closet. I have my drawers organized a certain way, and it just feels like an oasis of sanity. I feel like I don't have any kind of staticky, destructive, chaotic energies, that's just hidden away. And that also makes me feel mentally a little bit more cleared up too. So can you
Confession,
really?
I am also OCD, so the wrong
Oh,
person to
good.
ask would be me because
Oh, good.
I also believe that it must be cleaned and put away and it's got an order and you kind of want everything to be just so, and it may not make sense to you but it makes sense to me, and that's ultimately what matters. So with the pantry and the cabinet and the clothes and the everything, I'm right there with you.
Oh
And
gosh.
if you're part of if you're part of the ones who thrive on chaos and the kind of hecticness, you're not alone. There are other people out there that love that stuff, but it's just not us.
No, I unfortunately, sorry to disappoint, not us. And this actually reminds me of a story. I haven't thought of this in years. My mother was a hyper organized person, but she wasn't organized like I am because I want to be organized so I can feel calm. She wanted to be
Right.
organized for the sake of being organized. It was like a psychological tick, almost.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, you know what I mean. Well,
Right.
she liked everything in its place and it did the place for everything and all that good stuff, except for one thing, and that was the utensils drawer. And I never understood
Oh.
it. She would just toss it in there any which way, and I'm like, and this is what actually told me that I actually do value, some degree of order, my own order. But I was like, no, 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 we got, and I would start arranging the butter knives, and I stack the forks nicely and get the spoons all over, and I just cannot stand that. And I like, Mom, you're so obsessive about everything else. How does this not bother you? She's like, oh, I don't care about that. And then I knew her organization was not actually about being organized. That was how I knew. Oh, and
Oh
worse,
yeah, no. That
my husband's
drive
the
me
same way.
crazy.
I am forever having to reorganize the utensil drawers, but of course he doesn't make a pretense of being organized, so I cannot charge that against him. But it's just, but doesn't it feel better when they're nicely arranged?
I think it does, and I know when they're not arranged in there. I can feel it.
Yeah, and that's why I don't like, super disorganized closets or dresser drawers or kitchen cabinets. Not because, I'm afraid someone's going to see the mess and judge me. I mean, please, of my circle of acquaintance locally, I'm probably the most organized amongst them. But it's just, I know that something is off kilter. Things are out of
Yeah.
the system, and I just feel like it's just going to spin out of control and not in a fun, good way. And like I have enough chaos inside my own brain, I don't need it in my environment.
No, not at all. Plus, I think that it kind of, depending on the situation, will muddy the atmosphere of what's going on in the household. You kind of get that neat prim on the outside, but if you know that all the junk is shoved into the closets, it's like
Hmm.
eventually you're gonna have to get in there, and then what?
Yeah. And then it tumbles out on your head and you're stuck. And then I think a lot of people, they get halfway through organizing, they give up and they just stuff it back in. I don't think it's an
Yep.
effective strategy, not mundanely and not magically. Because
Absolutely not.
I mean, when you think about it with our magic, we're trying to create a result. We're trying to take, energies that were disparate and then forming them into an order of our own design and in order to create something and bring something about. I'm like, how can we do that if we aren't even doing that at home? This is
Yeah,
this is
which I think
contradictory.
kind of leads really good into the next question,
Hmm.
too, is what makes what we do so particularly witchy? And I think that that's a great point, that we don't take the problem and shove it into the closet, so to speak.
Hmm. It goes right to our mindset of, oh, there's a difficulty. I'm going to do something to solve it. And here's all of my array of tools, and I can use all these different techniques in order to get something done. I think that is different from someone who might be, say, more of a devotional pagan, who's but then devotional pagan, they might be doing a bit of folk magic here and there, but they're not doing the rigorous discipline day in, day out. I'm putting on my witch hat and doing the stuff. They have a different kind of level of obligation, if you will.
Sure, absolutely, because anybody that practices on a daily basis will know that the whole point of boiling down a spell is intent. So if
Hmm.
you're doing things on a daily basis, it just makes sense to put intent behind those daily activities. And it's not hard and it's not something that takes particularly exorbitant amount of time. You just you do it while you're doing everything else. I don't know how else to explain it.
Yeah, well, and one thing that I realized because, no one, goes from, I think I'd like to study witchcraft to immediately implementing all the things you could do with it. Nobody does that. I don't care how much of a prodigy
No.
someone is. That isn't realistic. But, as you go through
No.
stages and you start realizing, oh, I'm learning about these things and about, these correspondences with colors and plants and animals and different kinds of woods and all this stuff. Is there a way that I can, make use of the stuff that's already in my environment now that I know they have these magical characteristics? And for me, that was my aha moment. And I realized I have these reservoirs constantly around me. And I'm like, well, wouldn't it be better if they were flowing in the same direction I was going? And then you really have to
Yeah.
start asking yourself what it is that you want.
Yeah, yeah. And that was the next thing that made it to my list is that the way you could tell that the household is particularly witchy, I think the most obvious way would be like seasonal decorations, the things that we
Hmm.
were talking about inside the home, because they are the things that are creating the intent. You place them there with the intent, and the object does what it's supposed to do, whatever it is they're corresponded with. And you started talking a lot about the color schemes and
Hmm.
rocks having certain qualities and properties. Everything really has some sort of connotation with it. So you're right. If you can take energy that already exists, and this is all I believe that magic is, anyways, is manipulating the energy that already exists. You
Hmm.
take that energy and you use it to your benefit and to your intent.
Yeah, and that goes from whether we're trying to create an atmosphere in a room, like, we want the living room to be restful, or we want the bedroom to be romantic, we want the kitchen to be creative, and we want the bathroom to be an oasis that's cut off from the rest of the world. We can use, our colors and our plants and everything. I mean, even in the choice of furniture materials, if we obviously have the finances to where we can, make deliberate choices rather than, kind of mend and make do, which, the way things are
Sure.
going, I think mend and make do is going to be where most of us are at for the foreseeable future. But I mean, that's the point. I mean, you use what you have. I mean, you have to kind of take on a more opportunistic mindset. At least I have found that,
Sure.
I have to start looking for opportunities to do something. And then once you see, oh, I can, it's like, well, what's stopping me? Well, just because I haven't formed the habit of doing it yet. And I think that with a witchy household, you do see that there is a little bit more habit, a little bit more routine. Even if you have to, as an outsider, kind of analyze your way to seeing through to the routine, once you start seeing certain consistencies, like, oh, she's doing that. Oh, okay, she's doing this. Oh, well, we must be in a new moon because she's freshening things up.
Right.
Or, oh, suddenly all the seasonal decorations have turned into this harvest theme. Oh, well, we must be getting into Lunasa, Mabon, and Samhain, and things of that nature.
Right. Well, our decorations are always a little bit off kilter too. I've noticed I'll either be behind or ahead of somebody because the Sabbath falls before the holiday or it falls after,
Hmm.
the recognized holiday of the year. So my decorations outside and inside don't come down when everybody else's do because they mean something different for us. Which is kind of like that beacon of light, like, hey, look over here, something different is happening. So you can find a lot of resources though. We were talking about resources, and I actually dug up my old book of shadows so that I could see. And it's funny that you mentioned the journey, because when you go back to see the work that you've done, to see where you are now, it's very rewarding. But um, I have to keep telling people that to ride a silver broomstick, Silver Raven Wolf, has a lot of correspondences, tables for colors, days of the week,
Hmm.
planetary alignments, um, just every gem that you could possibly think of, their element correspondence. It's all here. And I know this is an older book, but it is a really, really good resource that I even find myself going back to now, because there's so many things that you're not going to be able to remember everything. That's just the long and short of it. You're going to need a reference.
Yeah, I remember when I started the Wicca 101 classes, I think I mentioned several times that if you decide to get any kind of book at all, make sure that one of the things you get is a good, solid correspondence book. The one that I have, I mean, I get it out on a daily basis because I'm doing preparatory work for things for future posts, or because I'm wanting to confirm something. Because, like you said, you're not going to remember everything, and sometimes the memory misfiles things. And also, if you're looking for substitutions for any kind of spell work, whether it's for your household or anything else, you can find substitutions there. And as I'm getting more acquainted
Yeah.
with plants, I'm starting to realize, oh, okay, these plants, they bloom in different seasons. They're at their peak at different seasons. So no matter what season it is, I can go outside and I can probably find something. Isn't that isn't that thoughtful of nature? That we have more than
Oh,
one tool to get a
yeah.
similar result. And also you'll see that, there are usually less costly uh, options if you're needing to substitute things out. I mean, I think people get a little bit too hung up on their recipes and they forget about what a certain component of that recipe actually does. We have more freedom than we do with cooking, everybody. In case you didn't know, I mean, we are not tasting our spells the way we will be tasting our cooking. So we have a lot more wiggle room when it comes to switching things out in order to create the same effect.
Which goes right into the hearthcraft. So we could get
Hmm.
started talking about that now if you wanted to, because
Oh, absolutely. And can we
I think that
start
was a
with
great.
I
Go
was
ahead.
I was going to say, can we start by just making a solemn declaration that crockpots are electric cauldrons, and
Yes.
the naysayers can just go away and sulk because they are the most beautiful, wonderful tool.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that goes right hand in hand with what you were talking about um, in the seasonal aspect of things with what is in season.
Hmm.
Because if you travel far along enough the path, you realize that everything comes in cycles and it's not
Hmm.
like anything new is happening around this time of year or around any time of year. It's
Hmm.
always the same things. So if you can get things that are blooming in that time of the year, they're going to be a little bit extra charged.
Hmm.
Yeah, you can work with other elements and you can work with other vegetables or herbs or whatever, but it's better if you use what is actually in season. And you can actually taste the difference in your meals if you cook with things that are in season too.
Absolutely. And honestly, even in things that aren't being edible, like some of the potions I whip up, with my trusty crock pot.
Uh huh.
If I'm using, things that are fresh that are currently in season, it feels different. It like you said, I think you called it supercharged. I think that is a really
Yes.
good description for it. I know that not only is it going to do what it's going to do, it's not going to have to fight to get it done. That energy is
Right.
is ready to go. And honestly, I think that's why eventually you when it comes to your spells, I think you get tired of hitting your head up against the wall. You get tired of doing things the hard way. And then that's when you
Mhm.
start saying, okay, maybe if I just cooperated with the natural flow of nature and did things at certain times and used certain elements at different times of the year, maybe that would work better and I wouldn't have to work so hard. And then all of a sudden, you know, you're being refreshed and rejuvenated by your work. You're not being worn out. Ritual isn't tearing you down. You're not having to do eons and eons of extra meditation on top of what you ordinarily do. It's because you're actually within the flow. And I think that cannot be
Right.
emphasized enough.
No, you're absolutely right because the whole point is, in my opinion, to become as in tune with your surroundings as possible. Now, whether that be nature or your cityscapes or wherever you are in the world, you want to make sure that you're as in balance as possible. And sometimes that means being in balance with the resources available to you. And
Hmm.
that would be the things that are in season and available.
Yeah, and being attuned to your surroundings in general. I mean, I currently live in town, so I don't feel that pull as much just because there's so many people and the energy gets muddled up, so it's a little hard to feel a defined current. However, when we go out to the farm, and especially once we're living there, that has its own presence. The land, the house that is on the land, each of the buildings, because they've been there so long, there's just, it has its own very specific energy. So I have found myself less so when I do workings out there imposing my will on those surroundings as it is tapping into their needs and finding out what's really required. I feel it's turning and developing into much more of a symbiotic relationship, trying to give it what it's
Well,
needing, and then it is in turn taking care of me.
that's a great point. I was going to say that the two separate energies is wonderful to bring up because when you're in the city and you're around a lot of people and you don't necessarily have to be empathic to feel the vibes of the other people around you, and I think
Mm-hmm.
that's why it's really hard for any witch in the city to kind of feel grounded. They kind of have to work a little bit harder for that. They
Mm-hmm.
have to work a little bit harder on their meditation because they've got so much incoming energy from people around them that they're sensitive to. um, so people in different areas have to kind of attune their households in the way that will help them practice better, which goes back into bringing these little things into your house so that you can practice more smoothly, I guess is the best way to put it. Like you said, to put yourself in tune because riding the chaos, whether you're feeding off of that energy or not, like us who
Mm-hmm.
don't thrive in that atmosphere, it's a little bit more exhausting. I think even people that I've seen thrive on chaos are just a little bit more fringed, I
Mm-hmm.
guess frayed with their nerves, and they have to work a little bit harder. And not everybody's going to be able to, do what you and I did and kind of separate from that cityscape. So, how do you alleviate that burden? It starts in your household, like the things that we're talking about right now, and what you put into your body. We've talked about this before,
Oh, yes.
and while we're on Hearthcraft, like you said, you have to be aware of what you're putting in your body. I just got over sickness, and I'll tell you right now, black pepper and cayenne pepper for 3 days straight. Whatever I ate, I made sure it was in there just because it clears your sinuses and
Mm-hmm.
just a really good combination for kind of getting that gunky feeling out of your body. And like I said, little things like that you can do to improve your health is going to also help you with your practice in the long run.
Absolutely. And in reference to the peppers you just mentioned, I know that they're both aligned with the fire element. Well, what does fire do? It
Yes.
helps burn things away. It's purifying, whether we're talking about that spiritually or within the physical body. And it's a teeny tiny little thing. And I wonder if some people, if they if they imagine that the solution and the practice of living a witchy life, if it has to be great, big, overwhelming stuff, I'm like, no, not necessarily. Sometimes the smallest of things can have bigger long-term effects. You've got to let them do what they're naturally wanting to do anyway. And with
Yeah.
reference to having to take different precautions for your household, whether you're in a more populated area, one of the things I started doing when I was in town, because at the time I was working a very stressful job that was just sucking the soul out of me, at the local witch shop, she had these little teeny tiny soapstone animal figurines of different totems. Well, I ended up bringing home a lot of them, and a lot of them were the more predatory, guardian type of stuff. And I have often arranged them either in a circle of surrounding where I was doing my workings to kind of look after me, or I have faced them towards the front door as just kind of
Oh,
the
that's an
symbol of,
excellent idea.
yeah, of just like, keep out, keep that whatever's going on outside,
That's
whatever's
right.
going on with the job, it needs to stay out. And I mean, they're not even 3 inches high. These are itty bitty things. I could put them in my jeans pocket, no problem, and carry them with me. But
Wouldn't that be
yeah,
something?
yeah.
Nice little pet to bring along with you, to have that kind of spirit animal behind you all day. Wow, I like it.
Oh, I did once, but I had to kind of stop on that. I have a cobra because the first animal
Oh,
spirit that ever worked with me was the snake. And
mm.
that was the only snake figurine she had. So I thought, well, he can stand in for all snakes. So I stuck him in my pocket at work, and just because I was doing a lot of meditation with that spirit at the time. But I found that whenever I got angry or I felt threatened, I had the weirdest sensation from my canine teeth on my upper jaw. I almost felt like there was something dripping from them, like venom. And I realized, oh, well, we're getting a little bit too in tuned. Maybe we need something a little, a little more cuddly. So I stopped bringing that one to work with me. So you do have to
That would
exercise
stop
some
me too.
judgment. Well, I mean, you know how honest I can be, and at that job, I can
Oh
tell
yeah.
I was very honest, and I was very happy to hurt their feelings when I felt like they deserved it. So I felt like anything that added another layer to that probably was not going to be good for the situation. So,
Well, see, and good studies because you knew what you were doing and you knew that it was going a little bit in the wrong direction, so you
hmm
were able to kind of step back from that. And experience is a great teacher for those situations, and
hmm
I hope that nobody feels overwhelmed by the conversation because even though if you're not there yet, know that if you continue walking the path, you will be there. You will be there.
yeah. And also for anyone who might be feeling overwhelmed, again, not our intent, not at all, but
No.
just keep in mind is that you are always surrounded by resources and you will come to know how to use them better with time. And there's nothing wrong with something being a process. I mean, I was oh gosh, I was probably about 4 years into my studies before I really started implementing a lot of the things at home, and now they're just routine. Like after I do, my normal housekeeping. Well, I like to burn a little bit of Palo Santo, and then I like to waft everything from the back of the house to the front of the house, and then out the front door, and then waft it away from the porch, and then down the sidewalk and into the street to where it dissipates and get away from the house in case there's anything, lingering that I don't really want. Even if it's, obviously it's not really a conscious energy I'm concerned with because my house doesn't really have any conscious energy left over within it, but it is just kind of
Right.
like energy dust, emotional dust. That's the stuff I'm trying to get out of the house. And, and the first time I did it, it was like, oh gosh, it's another step to my housekeeping. What a drag. And then once it became routine, if I didn't do it, I felt funny about it. And I'm like, I need to get some more of my stuff. I need to carry on with what I'm doing because and that's just how it is. It's gradual lifestyle changes. And then once you start making them, all the people who say, "Oh, this is a this is a way of life, it's a lifestyle," it'll finally start making sense. But you just have to work yourself up to that point.
Oh yeah, and there's so much to learn, and there's so many people who have opinions on the situation that it really needs to be said that you have to take a step back and learn and then process and
hmm
then practice. So if you just remember that you're starting from scratch, so you have to find out what it is you want to do, your intention. Then you have to prepare for that intention. Then you have to call for help for that intention. Then
hmm
you have to consecrate everything, make sure that it's prepared for the proper intention, and then you get your intention,
hmm
ultimately speaking.
Well, and it was like there was a witch in New York, a second generation Italian family. They had practitioners going back as long as you could trace their family. And one of the things she used to tell me is that, you're getting to a point where you need to put down your books and you need to just focus on the doing. And, you'll get bumps
Right.
and bruises, you might need some band-aids, but guess what? You know experienced people, so you're not going to get yourself into such a mess that you'll be beyond the reach of someone else's help. It's like you just need to do the work. And I took her advice,
Yeah.
and things progressed from there.
Yeah, and you'll never know until you try.
Yeah, and that's the nice thing about all the hearthcraft is that it's not like you're going out into your local park and casting a circle and doing stuff for for a sabbat, with everybody watching. You're in your house.
Watching.
You can close the door, you can close the curtains, shut the blinds, whatever you need to do. You can create a more isolated spot to where it's just you working with the energies, and if you make a boo-boo, it's okay. And I think you need to
Right.
allow yourself room to make those mistakes, especially as you work towards getting good with things.
Right.
So,
Right.
this of course can also extend into the garden. I don't know. I know.
Hmm.
I know you had some sadness with your garden this year, so I hope I'm not salting any wounds. but uh,
No.
but this is definitely a part about living that witchy pagan lifestyle of there are things that we grow because we are witches. I was growing sage until they died, and I'm going to have to replant now, but that's something I grew specifically because I wanted to have them for my practice. What about you?
Yes.
Do, do you have any dual purpose things growing in your garden, or that you intend to grow?
Had,
Mm-hmm.
yes. As a matter of fact, the first and foremost thing that the garden was supposed to start for me was a homesteading prepping type of deal where
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to grow my own food because it
Mm-hmm.
tastes better, it's better for you, and you have control over what goes in to the garden. Unfortunately, like you said, I had a misstep with my garden, but I think I figured it out. With us being so close to all the trees, I
Mm-hmm.
believe that my trees actually sucked all the nutrients out
Oh.
of my vegetables. So, after doing some strategic planning, I have kind of redesigned everything, and I've got a few plants that are working right now just so that I can test the waters on bringing a new setup into the fall harvest because a lot of people will grow the summer gardens, but they
Mm-hmm.
forget about the cool weather vegetables. And the cool weather vegetables are just as important and can be just as fun to grow right before the end of the harvest season. So I was also growing sage and rosemary. I
Mm-hmm.
just actually found 4 or 5 sage plants that didn't die out all the way. So
Oh,
I
good.
transplanted them. Yeah, I transplanted those into the raised bed that I have, kind of experimenting right now. So hopefully those guys will come back to life for me. And I did. I like using sage and rosemary to cook, especially chicken. My family's a
Mm-hmm.
chicken family. They love it. So sage and rosemary goes great with chicken, but they also have a lot of good properties in satchels and potpourri, and they smell really good. I know lots of people are into saging their house and things like that. So those were kind of like the dual type herbs. I know that there's a bunch that you can grow, but I've got to get to the good part. So that goes into again knowing that you can't fix it all with magic.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, I did a blessing over the garden and asked the harvest gods to bless what I was doing, and for a while it looked like they were thriving. But nature will be your ultimate teacher, and unfortunately, nature that was already existing took over what I put into its environment. So I was slapped a little bit upside the head with, hey, you've actually got to think about what you're doing here and who needs what in the ground. So it's not so much magical as it goes back to the mundane where you're like,
Mm-hmm.
oh, okay, now I've got to check the soil, make sure that this is good. But if you do that with intent, then you could turn it back into something magical. And hopefully, this time around, fingers crossed, this raised bed gets the plants the nutrients that they need, that they can actually perform the way that they should.
Oh, fingers crossed. I hope that does work out because I was crying with you when you told me what happened to your poor veggies. I felt so
I
horrible.
did. I
It's
cried. I cried the whole day. I felt so bad.
oh, it's crushing
Because
because
then,
you put love
yeah,
into
you
it.
think about it. And you're like, well, I did this. I did this. I should have known better. And you win some, you lose some. So we're gonna try again. You get back up on that horse.
Yeah. And and also with it's not just our veggies or our fruits that we can do this with, or even with our herbs. I have found that we can even do work a little bit more magically with our flowers and the sheer decorative stuff of it. Um, and I've been doing a lot of work with a color scheme at the flower bed and farmhouse. I started the flower bed with flowers I already had in my flower bed in town. They all got transferred eventually. And also what was
Uh-huh.
already previously growing on the farm. And someone ages ago had planted all these irises, all these daylilies, all these daffodils, all this stuff. And I thought, well, I'll just move you to a more appropriate place. And I didn't worry too much about what colors I was using because I figured, you add enough stuff, it'll all look fine. It'll just be very cottagey and that'll be fine. Well,
Uh-huh.
when I saw the plants that were all willing to live and I saw how they were interacting together, I realized that when they were at their best, it had this effect of looking like a sunrise or sunset. And I thought,
Oh,
liminal space. And I like, well, isn't that
yeah.
handy on the magical level?
Mm-hmm.
I can have kind of this constant, all of the freaking time, moment in between moments, standing on the edge of two different things. And I thought, and then and the long term plan is eventually to take that flower bed with that color scheme to put it all around the house, to put it essentially in this ring. I'm creating almost a veil of my own, but instead of a veil between the worlds, this is a veil between, the house and everything that is going on outside of it, and giving it a little bit of a shield. And that was a happy accident.
Awesome. Yeah, that you love it when stuff like that lines up. I mean, how could you get any better?
Yeah, and I also didn't have to buy those freaking flowers. So hooray for the hooray for the budget. We're
I love it. I love it.
We're just
Heck
barely getting into
yeah.
the point where we actually have to buy a few plants here and there, but I'm also starting to have a plan. I'm like, okay, we have these plants, I need to create a rhythm with it. And sometimes if you just allow things to naturally evolve, you end up with this really cool result that you couldn't have planned. And I think that'd be a good lesson for any pagan housekeeper of allowing that process to take place.
My aunt actually, she took me out the one day. She's like, "We're going to go looking for plants." I said, "What do you mean we're going to go looking for plants?" She's like, "Oh, yeah." She's like, "I do this all the time. Just grab your shovel and get in the car." And we did. We went out and drove around and dug up plants on the side of the road that we wanted to come and bring back to the house and transplant. I think I got her some ivy and a few purple plants that were growing off on the side of the highway and a couple other things that she wanted, and we transplanted them into her yard and they did really well.
Sweet.
So there's a good frugal way to get plants.
There is. We might be poor, but we'll be able to still have pretty gardens that will also serve our needs.
That's
So,
right. So if they're just growing off to the side of the road and they're not in anybody's yard or anything, just transplant a couple of your own and let them serve your purpose.
it goes back to having that opportunistic mindset of recognizing when something good has just crossed your path and deciding to seize the moment of it.
Right?
S-
Absolutely.
So, let's go on to the house spirit and also the question of, does home equal temple?
Oh, that was a great question. But I do want to talk about the house spirits
Mm-hmm.
first because a couple things came to mind. Now, uh, you have to do a little bit of experimentation, I guess, with your house spirit to find out exactly what it's attached to.
Mm-hmm.
Because I've ran into house spirits and I've ran into spirits that are attached to the land, and then I've also ran into spirits that you can attract. So depending upon what we're dealing with, I guess would be the proper way to deal with it. So if you're talking about a house spirit, one that's already in the house, it's attached to the on what you, I guess, change or move or manipulate in the house may stir up that energy, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you're kind of adding on, or I don't know, just kind of moving stuff that shouldn't be moved. You might agitate a house spirit. You might find that snafus happen, or some people like to call them poltergeists, or, things go missing and stuff like that. So that's usually how I identify like a house spirit. When we moved the trailer onto the land, I knew there was never a house here, but you can sense a presence.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of how I learned about spirits that are attached to the land, because I know that there was never a house here. And even, out of the corner of your eye, you can catch a glimpse of something. Or I've seen somebody standing at my front door when my door's been open and nobody's really there or anything like that. And I just kind of feel like it's a curious entity, like there's been nothing here before. What you got going on in here? And they don't really care that anything's manipulated. It's just a feeling of a presence that I get. And then, of course, yeah, spirits that you attract, depending on who you have hanging around you, they can react differently to your surroundings as well. And maybe they don't like that you've moved this or that or the third, or maybe they're attached to an object in your house and they don't like where they are now located. So I think that house spirits can be kind of tricky. And you should dive into knowing what type of house spirit you're dealing with, if you feel that you have one.
Yeah, and it also kind of depends on, whether it's benevolent or malevolent, because sometimes the house spirit is just, the spirit that has grown up within the house and is just its point of attachment is essentially the walls itself. It's just this is its spot. This is where it came into being. One of my
Right.
theories is that sometimes I think these can grow out of layers and layers of ambient energy. Like where I'm living now, there's nothing conscious currently, but as long as this
Hmm.
house, as long as it continues to exist, if it's, allowed to and maintained, I do think that eventually something would be born here. And one of the things I'm doing now in kind of this prenatal stage is to kind of nurture the energy that's around, making sure that there is a good and a wholesome atmosphere, and that it's more so nurturing. And, maybe that'll pay off in the long run. I may never know if it does, but, maybe it will. But then when I get out to the farmhouse, I don't want to say I feel something that's fully conscious, but it would be damn near if it's not. And with that, I
Right.
take an entirely different approach because when we started working with it, one of the things I did the Marie Kondo thing. I kind of sat down and I greeted the house. I put out my feelers. I let it know that it was there. I let it know that I knew it was around and that I wasn't trying to be pushy. But I also stated our intentions. Before we did the first thing, I stated our intentions. I said, we are wanting to live here. We're wanting to repair the house. We want to bring it to, its full glory. We want this to be a place of love and a place where people can really live. And I want to make everything beautiful here. I want to take care of you. And, since then, I have had the sense that it's been feeling me out, seeing if I'm going to follow through on my word. And every time we make significant progress, I have an increased sense of peace whenever I walk into the house. It's like it realizes that, okay, they meant what they said and they're doing what they're saying. And when it
Right.
comes to
Right.
planning decorations and what we're going to be doing and everything else, I do feel like we have a triumvirate system that's being developed. It's what I think, it's what my husband thinks, and then it's what the house is going to put up with. And there's been plenty of
Right.
ideas. We talked about them, then we got up to the farmhouse and we started talking about the idea, and we just both felt this flat no. And we took that no, and like, okay. And that's kind of also what I was getting at with that more symbiotic relationship with the energies that are at the farm, because whatever is in the house, it's something that I can negotiate with. It's something that I can look after and that I think will in turn look after us. And also I don't feel like it has any malicious intent because it knows that we're not there to attack it or to dislodge it. And as for
Right.
the land itself, first there's the natural energies and cycles going through with the seasons. There's that to attune to and do with, but also
Hmm.
there's been a lot of history in this area of Missouri. I think there was some battles during the Civil War. There is a cemetery on the farm. It's a field separates it from the house, so it's not too close, but still, once I'm out there, that's all within my purview to look after and to make sure that I
Yeah.
am doing my part to create an atmosphere that's going to be good. One things we're going to do with the cemetery is because it got terribly overgrown. So once we clear that out and deal with it, I'm going to be planting trees and flowers and shrubs that have a specific relationship with the other world. And also, I'll be putting in some safety measures just in case there is anything unfriendly there. I don't want it spilling out elsewhere. But I'm also putting things in
Right.
there to calm it and soothe it. And I'm having a very simple color scheme. I'm just going to have greens and whites, something to where the natural surroundings, they're enhancing the cemetery. They're not taking away from the headstones. I'm going to make sure the headstones are cleaned up and taken care of, and that due honor and respect is being served. And I just feel like that's my duty. And it's a doubly my duty because I am a witch. I mean, just being on the property, that in of itself would make it my job. But because also a witch is also a priestess, at least in some contexts, I just feel like this is something that has to be done. And I'd be really
Oh,
not fulfilling my job if I didn't do it.
absolutely. Absolutely. Just honor, respect, and reverence
Hmm.
for the last resting places. I think that's very important. In Georgia, we are known for having like the most dead people buried on site because they didn't have um, cemeteries just when they started Savannah. So a lot of people were just buried on their own property, and a lot of places where I am are rural areas. So they definitely had many members of the family that were buried on the property. And you can kind of feel that as soon as you come into the city and the surrounding areas. So it's not out of the norm to want to take that reverence and kind of show it some respect and
Hmm.
show that, hey, I see this and I'm showing you respect. I don't want any bad connotations.
Yeah, and that's one thing that I think does make us unique as witches. I mean, other pagans, I mean, I'm sure many pagan pasts have a great reverence for those who have passed, particularly of their own ancestors. But, the duty to do something, I don't think is as strong and as ingrained. Whereas with us, it's like you're a walker between the worlds. This is literally
Right.
what you do. This is a big aspect of it.
Absolutely.
So I think that slides right now real nicely into the idea, does home equal temple?
See, now I love that question because I do think that it becomes your temple. But is it something that can I walk into your home and worship the way that I worship at home, the way that a Catholic would walk into a church and feel at home? No. So I would say yes and no,
Hmm.
because the world is technically our temple, in my opinion, and the
Hmm.
home's just like another tool to use in the temple of the world. Does that make
Hmm.
sense?
Oh, absolutely it does. There is something that's a bit more intimate in the home. I mean, I like you. I agree with you. I mean, it is certainly your own temple. And if you have a family of pagans, I mean, look at the ancient Romans. They had their household gods, they had their altars, and that was something the family was focused on, even if, perhaps their neighbors were not, or they had different relationships
Right.
with different deities. But I also think it,
Right.
it
Oh,
depends
yeah.
on how much space you have to work with. Because on the farm, I'm going to have the space to eventually set aside a place where my husband is, because we have this much rock in the soil. I mean, it is unreal. He's wanting to take that rock and actually build me a little stone cottage that I can have essentially my witchy hub. The house is still
Oh,
going to be witchified and
nice.
protected, believe me, but that'll be more so of my
Yeah.
working hub. That way it's away from it, and I can essentially do what I do to my heart's content, not have to worry if someone would find it a bit odd about, why I was sewing the poppets and stuffing them with herbs in the middle of the dining room. I have a little bit more
Right.
privacy. But also,
Right.
there's enough for a little bit of area. I'm going to have a clearing. I'm going to use some of that stone and make a stone circle. I mean, obviously, this won't be Stonehenge, but it will be a defined area. Now, in that case, while someone might not be able to come into my actual house and do their normal worship there, I could envision having a group of pagans out to that stone circle once it's built and having ritual there, and that being more of a not necessarily spiritually neutral space, but more so, I guess, a spiritually open place of, this isn't,
A group.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this isn't,
Group activity.
yeah, this isn't as
Hmm.
intimate as my house. This is a little bit more, this is more so where it's about the land and nature and the gods and any spirits around. It's more so about a place to offer that reverence. And, will anybody other than me ever worship there? I don't know. But, I am appreciative of the fact that I have that luxury to look forward to, that if I wanted to or if I needed to, it would be available.
Oh yeah, and again, that's not to say that the home isn't going to be your main. And see, but here's the thing. This is why I hesitate to even say that because the home isn't my main area of worship because I want it to be. It's just because that's where I normally am. But it
Hmm.
it doesn't stop me from casting spells if I'm at the grocery store or
Hmm.
if I'm over my friend's house or if I'm driving somewhere for whatever reason. I don't do that very often these days. But, it doesn't, it's not like I have to be at home to worship. So I thought that was a great question because a lot of people say that, oh, well, the house is my temple. And I always ask them, well, you don't take your religion with you?
Yeah. Well, I mean, our ancestors certainly did. I mean, anywhere where they happened to settle, I mean, they had their gods and, they had representations of whatever they deemed to be important. I mean, the gods go with us, but I think that's also because, we are connected to them. At least
Right.
we ought to be.
We ought to be. You're right.
Oh, gosh.
So
So,
I guess that I was going to say that leaves us with just the path on the daily then.
yeah, and also I'd like us to touch on if we can cast our minds back and remember that far about some ideas about how can people who haven't already started incorporating this into their homes, how can they begin to live their path within their homes? What would be good starting points? Because that's always the first and the biggest psychological hurdle.
Um, you know, in my very early studies, I have it written this way. Meditation and consecration can be one of the very first things that you do because you can very easily incorporate those two things into your daily routine.
Hmm.
Whether you meditate while you're doing some mundane activities that you don't need a lot of brain power for, you do it in the shower, you do it a little bit before you get up and brush your teeth and get dressed for the morning. Any type of meditation that you can do, get that into your daily habit and consecrating your areas, just getting them prepared to do magical work. So,
Hmm.
cleaning, making sure that your tools are ready, stocking your cabinet, just kind of make that little bit of preparation and get everything kind of separated and ready for yourself. And then you can just kind of do some basic chants, like if you wake up in the morning and pay homage to the sun, start yourself with a daily devotional,
Hmm.
write a morning spell, something to get yourself up and motivated for the day, something that attracts positive energy to you. Those are little chant spells, invocations that you can do to feel a little bit more witchy before you even step foot out the door for the day. I think that's the best place to start.
Absolutely. And I was also thinking of very simple things like some very rudimentary kitchen magic. You don't have to concentrate on the correspondences of every single ingredient. Choose a single herb. And once you know some of the things that herb is good for, think about if that's relevant for your life. In a simple little chant, asking the herb to perform a particular job, that can be something that you do. Doesn't take 5 minutes, and yet you have done and accomplished something witchy when you're doing your
The color
laundry.
of your clothes. Color of
Exactly.
your clothes. That's
And
super easy.
and speaking of clothes, when you toss them in the laundry, or you do any other kind of thinking, just focus that attention. You're not only getting rid of the dirt and the grime, you are getting rid of all of the energy attached to it. Anything that is not promoting the well-being of your household. And it just takes a little bit of focus and a little bit of willpower. I mean, that's something that's very simple to be done. And And for first thing in the morning, I often bless my tea, particularly the sugar in my
Yes.
tea, particularly if I woke up in
Hmm.
a bad mood. Like, may this sugar sweeten my spirit as it did my tea. Simple. You just come up with this stuff on the fly, and you shouldn't be afraid to come up with that. Not everything has to be formal.
No, not at all. And I'm so glad you brought this up because I wrote it down. I haven't yet. But charming your animals,
Hmm.
talking to your deities, um, just kind of having a conversation with the universe as the day goes on. That's not crazy. That's witchcraft. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I had to say that.
And long may it be emphasized. If necessary, we shall tattoo it on the inside of people's eyelids because it is
You
part of
know,
our life.
it is. It really is. And I find myself often, talking to the plants, talking to
Hmm.
my animals, talking to the wildlife, talking to the house, talking to my cooking, talking to everything because intention is the root of all spell work.
Hmm.
And the best way to get your intentions across is to vocalize it. It's the most powerful thing you can do. Vocalize your intentions, and then you can materialize your intentions, or at least that's what we believe. So,
Yeah.
don't be afraid to chant to yourself or talk to that thing or, whatever it is you've got to do. Do it.
Yeah, and particularly when it comes to deities, whatever deity you're working with, if you give them a small little offering in the morning, I always make Loki a cup of tea. Yeah, don't ask if it works for us, but
That's right.
sometimes
Incense,
yeah,
wine,
absolutely,
tea,
little
little
bits,
cakes,
yeah,
anything.
absolutely.
I mean, paper. There's little pieces of paper that some deities like. I know that fairies like sprinkles and sparkles and things like that.
Hmm.
Trust me, you already have most of this stuff in your household, I promise.
Oh, absolutely. And even if you shared a small portion of your breakfast. I had peach muffins this week, and believe me, those were very
Oh.
popular. Oh, yeah. So I was definitely on
Hmm.
orders to share those. But, by offering
Hmm.
that, giving him, piece of the muffin or the bagel or the bacon or whatever I'm eating, giving him the tea and just, saying a few words to him. And sometimes I feel very formal and it is a little bit more of a formal affair. And sometimes it's very simple. And sometimes it's just, so I'm stuck with
Right.
this thing, and I know I'm not. I know it's a problem of perception, and I can't quite seem to get my perceptions aligned so I can find the solution. If you have time and you feel inclined, if you could give me a nudge, I would be most grateful. And and sometimes I just leave it at that, and then sure enough, when the time comes, nudge, and I see the
Right.
solution. I mean, they are willing to help you, especially if you develop an actual relationship with them. Because I don't just give him things when I want something. I don't just give him when I'm asking for advice. I give him something every day because he is a part of my life. And especially if you have a patron deity, I hope they are part of your life like that.
Correct. And it goes beyond ritual. And I think that's
Hmm.
where a lot of new witches get like overwhelmed because they constantly feel that spell work has to have all these bells and whistles that go with it. In reality, everything that I use for everyday spell work is so mundane to the ordinary eye, you wouldn't even notice that I was doing anything different than anybody else. It's
Hmm.
ritual that really separates the big dogs from the little dogs, so to
Hmm.
speak, when it comes to a scale of grandeur and performance and a larger, I guess, incorporation of things. If you're going into ritual, it's way different than just your everyday kitchen magic.
Oh, for sure. And I love ritual. I mean, don't get me wrong.
Sure.
I mean, it's fantastic, but it's also not something that you do every single freaking day. I mean, that's the dressed up occasion. That's, you put on the good shoes for that kind of thing.
Yes,
But, for the
yes, yes.
everyday
That's
stuff,
your date night.
yes, that's a very good metaphor for it. That is the date night. Oh gosh,
Right.
when Loki decided that he was going to take over my life, when I started working with him, he made it very clear that if I was doing formal ritual with him, that there were certain things in my closet and in my underwear drawer that I would be wearing, because he said very specifically, you are coming in a more reverential manner, and also you are coming feminine. And
Right.
it's been very important to him that I lean further and further into my femininity. I think part of it is because of the job that I used to have. I had to adopt very masculine characteristics just to fight my corner, and that annoys me because I don't want to
Hmm.
have to be in that mode all the time. But also, I think it's more so about him making me acknowledge that the masculine energy present in that ritual is him, and he has
Correct.
more than enough, and it's my job to make up that balance of the feminine. And that's part of what we've really been working on. So you never know what your deities may request of you, but again, that's ritual, that's formal occasions. It's not the daily offering of the tea. That's a very different situation.
Yeah. And just to throw a resource into here, I know that I asked you if Leowin was still publishing.
Hmm.
When when you get started, what I found really useful, and I still think that they publish these, but you have to special order them. It is the Witch's Almanac.
Hmm.
And what it does is it gives you the lunar cycle for all of the months throughout the entire year, and it actually will give you suggestions on every day. I'm looking at an old one from actually 2003, but if you open it up, it's got a whole bunch of stories in it. I see the holly tree in here, the fox and the goat. They've got things about herbs and frankincense, but on the days, it'll tell you, when the vernal equinox is.
Hmm.
It'll tell you face the wind, welcome the green season. Every day has a little suggestion of things to do. So if you find yourself in a pickle where you're like, I've done all this stuff and I'm doing the same thing over and over again, go get yourself a copy or look up a copy of the Witch's Almanac. They are still publishing. You just have to special order them, and they are just great resources that I've used for years now. For people who need that little bit of extra, I guess, suggestion.
They also do a really good date book, and that's how I keep track of all of my astrology, everything. And
Yeah.
it's just nice to know where I am in the flow of time, because when I prepare the posts, we're in June now, but I've got the astrology figured out from now until the rest of the year. So so
Right.
I actually have to
Right.
reintegrate myself into where I am today, and that's really a useful resource. Oh gosh, and I think
Hmm.
that Llewellyn also publishes a yearly almanac on the Sabbats, just kind of more things that people have researched, different rituals they've tried, things that are on their mind, different details. And a lot of these things, it's just teeny tiny little lessons, and you never know when you're going to read a nugget that's actually going to help you, whether it's on ritual or on an everyday basis. But I mean, it's there. But since we're
Right.
talking about book suggestions, I've got a couple to leave people with, and I'll be leaving the titles for all of these in the description link, so never fear. But I would really like to recommend The House Witch by Arin Murphy-Hiscock. It's also free on Kindle, because I know budgets are of concern to everybody these days. It's a nice, good, grounding beginner's work that kind of lets you know the basics of what you're doing. It can give you a framework. Then there's Magical
Hmm.
Housekeeping by Tess Whitehurst. She's a little bit more of the how-to, as well as a little bit more of the philosophical side of things. Then, if you're looking
Nice.
for outright household lore, we have The Magical Household by Scott Cunningham and David Harrington. There's so much detail in that. You'll never remember it all, but it's a really good reference. I use it all the time. We
Uh
have
huh.
The Book of Kitchen Witchery by Cerridwen Greenleaf. Um, it's beautifully illustrated. It's very soft, and it feels almost like your auntie or your grandma witch is kind of teaching you some basic things. And then this isn't
Mm.
so much a pagan book, but it's so useful. I could not do without it. But The Wild and Weedy Apothecary by Doreen Shababy. Very handy stuff for every day, for some um, kind of at home remedies for various things. Very useful, very practical. And then a couple of Kindle options is the kitchen with Witch House by Sabrina Howard, and The Witchy Way for 21 Days by Armina Turner. I haven't read those, but they are available on Kindle, so if someone's looking for reading material, I wanted them to at least know that it was there. What about you?
Yeah,
Any other
absolutely.
book suggestions or resources you want to point out?
I do love Leowin as a publisher, and I would say for anybody that's looking for just like a solid stack of writers and people that you can go to for consistent information, because I know the biggest complaint that I've encountered is conflicting information. So if you're
Mm-hmm.
looking for something that's very steady and consistent, anything published by Leowin is pretty safe. But I pulled out a book by Dorothy Morrison, and if I can look in here, this was published in 1999. It's called Everyday Magic.
Mm.
And I've held on to this book for a very long time, but it actually deals with like modern day snafus. So it's actually set up in alphabetical order. It has slow cookers, electric potpourri pot spells inside of it. There are spells for gifts of nature, little herbs and things that you can do. And then it goes all the way into actual like modern stuff for, say, getting a raise at your job,
Mm-hmm.
daisy chain spells. There's some things in here for charming your printer and your computers and things. So I thought it was pretty interesting the type of spell work that was done in this book to kind of expand people's minds beyond what you usually use magic for. Now, of course, we aren't fully manipulating these things, but we want to draw the energy in a productive way. So
Mm-hmm.
this book is actually going to teach you how to draw that energy to manipulate these machines to act more behaved, I guess is the goal here. I haven't actually tried charming any of my computer or electronics, so if anybody does, you're gonna have to let me know. But there's a lot of useful things in here. It goes from A to Z. It's another really good book for learning the properties of herbs and candle magic, and gives you really good things to work from, because I don't like using direct spells from somebody else, but I will rewrite a stanza or a spell to what I need it for. So I think they're just good books for stepping stones.
I love it. I especially wish I had been aware of that during the last Mercury retrograde. You were aware of the massive technical issues that I was having during that time that are, mostly
Yeah,
resolved, but, not totally. Oh, that would have been nice. I'm going to have to look into that myself. But,
yeah.
so anything else you want to add, or do you think we've
No, I
overwhelmed
think,
everyone enough for the present?
oh my goodness, I think we did absolutely wonderful trying to explain to everybody what sets us just a little bit apart from society.
Yeah, we are a little bit different. We do still have things in common with everybody else, but I hope this explains a little bit of the why are we different as well. But
Right.
everybody who listened, thank you so much for sticking with us. We appreciate it whenever you listened all the way through on our long form conversations. That is absolutely freaking amazing. Please subscribe to my channel. Please subscribe to Wiccan Conservative. Leave us a like. And best of all, please leave us comments. What did you think? Did this make you think of anything else in your own practice that you'd like to share? Do you have questions? We'd be very happy to answer them. And of course, you can find both of us on Discord, which there is also a link to join in the description below. So, and
Join us.
join us
Join us.
because that's not creepy at all.
No. We are happy to answer any and all questions. And as a matter of fact, this is the whole point of this. It's
Mhm.
to web weave and learn as much as we can about our fellow pagans and our fellow witches out there. So we welcome you guys all.
Absolutely. This is how we are building the modern lore of our generation. So this is the fun part of our task as living in this era is that we get to build things in a way that people
Hmm.
in ancient times, they inherited, but we actually get to make it and shape it. So I think it's an exciting time to be alive. But anything else, ma'am, or are we ready to go?
We will just have to leave everybody for now, and we'll have to see them on the next one.
All right. Bye-bye, everybody.